We're going to look at fractions in a bit more detail just now, and we're going to look at how it connects to two other very important parts of maths. So decimals and percentages. Now, you might not know this already, but they are all actually interlinked, and quite commonly we want to go between the three different topics, okay? So it's important to know how they connect and know how to change one into the other. Okay, so I'm going to show you just now, and we're basically going to change a couple back and forth between the different types. Okay, so let's start with something like 3/5. So if we had 3/5 as a fraction, if we wanted to change it into a decimal, for example, what we'd basically have to do is we'd have to take the top number, so the 3, and we'd have to divide it by the bottom number. Right, at the end of the day, all a fraction is a division. But it's a division we don't ordinarily want to do because we can't necessarily simplify it much better than what it is. But 3/5 we can still actually put in a calculator. We still do 3 divided by 5, okay? And then we can work out exactly what that is, and it would be a decimal. 3 divided by 5, when you put it into your calculator, would be 0.6, okay? So there you have it. 3/5 is a decimal. Right, similarly, if you're trying to change it to a percentage, okay, it's quite easy once you've got it as a decimal, okay, but in terms of straight from the fraction, if we were to change it into a percentage, what we basically want to do is we want to write it out of 100, okay, so we want the bottom number to be 100. And this is where your equivalent fractions is going to come in, okay, because what we're basically doing, if you look closely here, you've taken the 5, okay, and you've times it by 20 to give you 100 on the bottom. Right, so what we're basically going to do is we're going to do exactly the same to the top. So if we take the 5 times it by 20 to give us 100, we're going to take the 3 and times it by 20, and that will give us 60, okay? What we're basically doing here is we're creating an equivalent fraction in the same way that a half is the same as 2/4, or a fifth is the same as 2/10. We're just going that one step further, but we want the bottom to be 100. And the reason for that, if you think about what a percentage is, it's out of 100. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a fraction here that's out of 100. Okay, so we need the bottom number to be 100, and then we basically just need to work out what we do to make it 100. Okay, right, now basically we're saying it's 60 out of 100, and that is just 60%. Okay, so that's the fraction changed into percentage as well. Right, you could have done it from the decimal. If you think 0.6, what that means, that's actually 6/10. Okay, or it could be 60/100ths. So you can actually go straight there from the decimal or the fraction. But the point is, okay, we now have all three versions. We have it as a fraction, we have it as a decimal, and we have it as a percentage. And all three are useful in different forms. Decimals is more like the numbers that we're used to, okay? That's basically allowing us to kind of use a calculation with 3/5, perhaps more what we're used to. A lot of you always ask when you do a test or something like that, what was my result as a percentage? Because percentage gives people an idea, an understanding of what that number actually means. 3/5, a lot of people don't know what 3/5 is. They don't know necessarily how big or small it is. And that's why we often use percentages. Okay, we're putting it into a format that we understand. 60%, we know that's more than 50%. Okay, so we know it's better than half. If you looked at 3/5, especially with more complicated fractions, it might be more difficult to understand that. But as a percentage, it's quite clear to see how good or how bad, how big or how small that number is. Okay. Right, so similarly, if we had something like, let's say, we started with a percentage, and let's say we had 35%, okay? So that's the number that we're starting with, that's the percentage that we're starting with. We want to change it to decimals and fractions, okay? Right, in terms of changing it to a decimal, what we basically want to think of this is 35%. It is 35 out of 100. And if we know what it is as a fraction, okay, one, it's going to help us over here, but it's also going to help us in terms of a decimal. Because what, again, as I said in the first one, all it is just a division. We can do 35 divided by 100, which gives us 0.35. And there we have it as a decimal, okay? And hopefully you'll be able to see little similarities here, okay? So for the 0.6, it was 60%. In fact, basically what the 0.6 was 0.60, wasn't it? Okay? So 35% is 0.35. Right, we've already basically got it now actually as a fraction. Okay, so it's 35 over 100. But what we want to do generally when we've got fractions is we want to simplify them. And this can be simplified a little bit. When we're dealing with fractions or decimals and percentages, 100 is quite a nice number to leave it with. Okay, but when we're dealing with fractions, we want to simplify it as much as we possibly can. And when we're simplifying fractions, just remember you want to divide the top and the bottom by the same number. 35 and 100 both divide by 5. There's 7 of them in 35. And 100 divided by 5 is 20. And we can simplify that to 7/20. Okay. So then one more, we'll do it in a nice green color. Right, we're going to change a decimal into the other two. So let's say I had something like 0.08. Okay, so that's a decimal, and we're going to change it to fraction and percentage. Right, if I change it to percentage first, what I need to think about, I need to think in terms of place values. What I've got here, okay, I've basically got 0 tenths, and I've got 8 100ths. And if I've got 8 hundredths, that in itself is a fraction, okay? So I can pop that over here as well. I'm going to come back to that in a second. But in terms of the percentage, if it's 8 over 100, if it's 8 hundredths, that's 8%, okay? Right, 8 over 100 is fine in most instances, but again, we want to simplify it if we can do, okay? And in fact, these both divide by 2, okay? And if we divide them both by 2, we get 4 over 50. But again, we want to simplify as much as we possibly can. That is simplified, but we can simplify it a little bit further because again, these two both still divide by 2. We can simplify that to 2 over 25. And there you have it. There's 3 different means of changing between fractions, decimals, and percentages. Okay, and all 3 are